G'day, welcome my friend to WTK, the What to Know Show. I'm your host, Peter Whalen. Do you believe that you can improve your life by learning from the successes and failures of other people? If so, then I invite you to read How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big by Scott Adams. Also, you should subscribe to my What to Know channel because that's kind of the point of it. I've read thousands of books, and if you're going to read just one book in your entire adult life, this is the one I recommend. It's both entertaining and life-enhancing, and the sooner you read it, the better. I'll be teaching my son and godson lessons from this book. Now, before I read any book about success, I like to first read this XKCD comic by Randall Munroe on survivorship bias. I learned of XKCD from Scott. Never stop buying lottery tickets, no matter what anyone tells you. I failed again and again, but I never gave up. I took extra jobs and poured the money into tickets. And here I am, proof that if you put in the time, it pays off. Well, you know that's ridiculous. This cartoon quickly reminds me that we never hear from the millions of losers that took the same actions and failed. So, who is Scott Adams? He's an entrepreneur with an MBA. Scott had the #1 best-selling ebook in the history of the world, God's Debris, even though there was no humor, sex, or violence in it. Scott has sold over 12 million books. Scott has made more money in a year as a public speaker than most people do in a lifetime. And that's particularly remarkable because he lost his ability to speak in public for years. At 60 years old, Scott is fit and healthy with a flat stomach. I'm impressed by that. He dates a successful, pretty smart, and funny woman, Christina Basham. She's big on Instagram. He's insightful with an uncommon perspective. Now, you've already seen Scott's work. Scott's very first book, The Dilbert Principle, was a #1 New York Times bestseller. The Dilbert comic strip is his most well-known venture. It appears daily in over 2,000 newspapers in like 65 countries. So he's the most successful cartoonist in the history of the planet. Imagine that. Scott, I call him Scott because that's his name. He doesn't know me from Adam. I don't mean to imply that he knows me. I'm a fan of his work. As a cartoonist, Scott gets straight to the point, so it must be hard for him to write a whole book. Here's an example of his work.
Unmarried men commit 90% of all violent acts. They should all be jailed in advance to prevent further atrocities, and I should become a media sensation for suggesting such a provocative thing. The end. It's hard to write a whole book when you're as gifted as I am at getting to the point.
He's published around 10,000 comic strips, and he did it all on purpose. He's already won big. He reminds me of the Kilgore Trout character in Kurt Vonnegut's book, Breakfast of Champions. He's fabulously well-to-do. He has an estimated net worth of around $60 million. That's $1 million for every year around the sun. But don't hold that against him. He's earned it. I used to have a low opinion of millionaires. Everything I knew about millionaires I learned from Gilligan's Island. But now, every time I look at people like Scott, self-made millionaires who are useful contributors to society, I admire them. He keeps working even though he has more money than he can ever spend on himself, which means that another $1 million one way or the other won't have much impact on his day-to-day life. Imagine what that would be like. I personally hope he becomes a billionaire like Elon Musk or Bill Gates. The way I see it, they're all working on behalf of humanity. How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big, kind of the story of my life. That's a persuasive title because when I read it, I thought, I haven't failed at everything. Maybe I can win big too. So as you continue to watch my invitation to read this book, you'll decide for yourself if you want to. Reading this book is an experience that a video can't substitute for. There's a tremendous amount of life-improving ideas in here, including there are chapters on personal energy, affirmations, managing your attitude, humor, happiness, diet, fitness, and much more. Scott is a trained hypnotist, and in this book he used hypnotic writing to make suggestions that you'll be more likely to follow, such as being active every day, eating healthy, purchasing everything he sells, reading every book he's ever written, reading every blog post, watching every Periscope, promoting his work for free, telling all your coworkers that Scott Adams is the best. I even bought the t-shirt. Did you see what I did there? Wait for it. Wait for it. I pretended that Scott mesmerized me because he's a trained hypnotist. I point that out because I've noticed some people can't tell when I'm fooling. And Scott makes the unbelievable claim that a third of all people can't tell when someone is joking. I find that hard to believe, but I can't discount the idea either. He is an expert on humor. So let's get into the book. On page 107, he writes, "If you see something that impresses you, a decent respect to humanity insists that you voice your praise, and that withholding that praise borders on immoral." I read this 4 years ago, and that line has been bouncing around in my head ever since. As a result, I'm voicing my praise for the books and ideas and activities that impress me through this channel. And Scott impresses me. I disagree with much of what he has to say, but I like to challenge my beliefs. So, what's the biggest mistake you've ever made? What's the first mistake you remember making? Through my fault, through my own fault, through my most grievous fault, I've made my share of mistakes. And in here, you'll learn how to limit both the number and severity of the mistakes that you make. 17, he asserts that understanding your dozens of cognitive biases is vital to your financial health. What you don't know can cost you money. I'll include a link to those in the show note. There's also a chapter on happiness. My mom always said we're born to suffer, so I have a lot to learn about happiness. And Scott suggests you can be happier if you have control of your own schedule and feel that your life is improving. It's not about where you are so much as about where you're headed. Scott maintains that goals are for losers, literally, and that systems are for winners. And I had trouble understanding what he meant by that. Systems analysis was one of the courses I had to pass for my computer science diploma, and my first thought was that systems are what help you achieve your goals. You can't get what you want if you don't know what you want. I've also studied 3 different goal setting courses, and I bought into them based on a lie. They claim that there had been a study done at Harvard or Yale which found that 1% of the students with written goals later had more wealth and success than the other 99% combined. There was never such a study. People sell goal-setting programs by highlighting the exceptional achievers and ignoring all the people who used the program, set goals, and failed. Remember that XKCD cartoon on survivorship bias? I think Scott framed it as a systems versus goals concept to make the idea sticky. I find myself repeatedly coming back to the notion, and I've read this book 4 times now. And some people think that the secret, and that will somehow magically happen. They never create a system that has them working every day towards that result. With good systems, you're putting yourself in a position where you might get lucky. Imagine, like, the idea is that even when you trip, you fall forward, and that's progress. Let's use the example of the goal of having a flat stomach. The way I eat, there's a slim chance of that. The SMART goal is specific, like six-pack abs, measurable, you can see them, agreed upon, anyone can tell if the goal has been reached, realistic, other fat people have done it, and time-based. By September 2018, I'll lose over 50 pounds of fat. With a focus on the goal, you're always falling short. You may get to achieve your goal, but it's a short-lived experience. And a requirement of a system is that you expect it to give you a favorable result most of the time for most people. Now, I've repeatedly achieved that goal of losing fat, but I didn't sustain it. I didn't have a system to maintain it long-term without draining my limited willpower. And I bought into so-called systems from Weight Watchers, Nutrisystem, Jenny Craig, various gyms, and millions of their customers have proven that those don't work for most people in the long term. So there has to be a better way. And Scott defines a system as something that you do regularly that improves your odds and makes you more skilled and valuable. So even when you fail, you've learned something useful. A great system will give you multiple ways to succeed and no way to fail. With a system, you focus on the daily process, being happy about that daily directed effort. Your focus is not on the end goal, but on the daily activity. And every day that you follow your system, you win big. So goals work fine for like simple situations, but life is too complicated and changing too fast to have well-defined long-term goals. In IT, we have methodologies such as Agile for dealing with that problem. And realize that this channel is an example of a system. I'm an IT guy, a techie. As a group, we're not known for conversational or public speaking skills. So I decided that's a useful skill for me to work on. Also, you can have a system to increase your chances of succeeding without having a specific goal in mind. In his autobiography, Up Till Now, by William Shatner, he describes his simple system that led to his greatest financial success. When the phone rings, William Shatner answers it, and he says yes to whatever is offered him, as long as they can agree on compensation. So years ago, when he was offered the chance to record an album, he said yes, even though he wasn't a singer. Let's have a listen to that.
Yourself in a boat on a river with tangerine trees and marmalade skies. Somebody calls you, you answer quite slowly. A girl with kaleidoscope eyes. Cellophane flowers.
That's considered the worst Beatles cover of all time and a humiliating failure. But over 20 years later, when Priceline needed a pitchman, they thought of Shatner because of that album. And they didn't have any cash. All they could offer was stock in their company. And that horrible album led to Shatner earning more money than everything else he did in his life combined. You couldn't plan that. So that's the power of a system that puts you in a position where you could get lucky. And luck was a big part of that. Scott also proposes the idea of a talent stack. You have thousands of skills and talents, and Scott asserts that something special happens when you strategically stack your talents. Now, what does that mean to stack talents? So here's an analogy from my field, IT. We stack one technology on top of another to produce the internet. That's the TCP/IP stack. And for web services, we have the Linux operating system supporting the Apache web server with MySQL for a database and PHP for coding. And that's the LAMP stack. So by stacking various independent technologies on top of one another, we're able to build systems that support our modern world. I'll show you what I mean with, I've got my son's blocks here. And a useful talent stack consists of talents that build on top of one another. Imagine these blocks are your talents, and at the bottom of your talent stack is the physical layer, your brain. Then you have your energy level. And improvements at the bottom of the stack improve everything that's above it. So for an IT person, rapid learning, touch typing, business accounting, programming are all useful skills to have. And sooner or later, when you stack your talents, you can reach higher heights than any single talent would get you. You don't have to have a single world-class talent to win big. And Scott claims that his talent stack consists of a number of average talents. He has a strong work ethic, but he's a mediocre artist. He's clever and funny, but at a party, there's usually someone funnier than him. He's earned his MBA, but it wasn't from Harvard. He's a good writer. He's a master persuader, and he knows marketing. And he stacked those talents to become a world-class cartoonist. So as I've said, I've read thousands of books, and I recommend reading this one above all others. It's packed full of jam with useful ideas that you can use to win bigly. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it if you do read it. Win Bigly is the title of Scott's next book. And my thanks to my friend, Lori Challenger, for suggesting today's show. You can see her in the How to Open a Banana episode of the What to Know show. Every time we watch that, we have a good laugh. Is there a show you want to see? Email whattoknow@peterwhalen.com, and maybe I'll make one for you. Thank you, Scott Adams, for this excellent book, and thank you for watching. Be seeing you. Oh, would you do me a favor and subscribe to the What to Know channel, because that means you want to see more of these. Give this video a thumbs up, even if you hated it, and share it with your best friend. If you're going to win, you might as well win big with your friends by your side. Thanks for watching. Bye.
That's fairly interesting. This is the What to Know Show with your host, Peter Whalen.